Good evening, everyone. This is a continuation of a hangout that I had with Eric Blair, which is also known as Social Justice Warrior 101. We had a hangout 2 weeks ago about multiculturalism, and it was cut off because Eric's microphone died mid-hangout. Or maybe it's just an excuse. I think that I made such a great argument that Eric had needed like 4 weeks to 3 weeks to think of a comeback, of a good comeback. So
you were beating me so badly that I couldn't think of an excuse to drop out. So I came up with a technical difficulty instead.
Yeah, what's it? I cannot hear you. My mic is dead. Okay, I'm gonna go now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just recap the last thing we talked about on the first part, and then we can continue from there. And I'll let you take the first shot because as what happened last time, I talked and realized that you're not on the call anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was actually trying to reply to some of your points, but to you, it must have seemed that I was letting you go on and on and on.
And to everyone else.
I was going to say that just as I was saying on and on and on. I thought, oh God, that doesn't sound too great.
Okay, so we talked about multiculturalism, and the last point I made was that you were thinking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, trying to suggest that it's better to become the whole world, to become one nation and one state, and because everyone is, every human is a human being on an equal level. And I was making the argument that there will always be this, even a biological or social thing in human beings, that you first care most for your kin, your daughters, your sons, and then your close family. You'll prefer their, if you need to protect someone or choose someone's life, you'll, will not put someone completely foreign from a different country over the best interest of your own kin. And then it goes, the circle grows to your good close family, then close friends, and then your nation, maybe your city, maybe your nationality, and so on and so forth. So that was the last thing
the first thing I should say is that it's been a little bit misremembered, because I was talking about on a philosophical level. I wasn't really talking about advocating that tomorrow. I was talking about, if we had ideal world situation, then that would be something that I would support. The removal of borders is completely logical from my perspective if we have a world in which that's possible. What I would say, in fact, I could probably turn it away. I could probably turn it around and say that if wealth was spread out more evenly throughout the globe, do you think that the removal of borders would be possible?
No, I don't, because again, it comes back to the same argument, which is people tend to be tribalistic in a way.
But are they tribalistic if they are wealthy? Because if you look at the areas of conflict around the world, you tend to find that they are in countries where poverty is king and war is king, basically.
Yeah, well, I think it's a biological thing, because you can even see it in monolithic groups, like, let's say, British people or Israeli people, where you have people just, splitting into groups, whether it's in sports. You like Liverpool, someone likes Manchester United, you hate each other's guts, and you love everyone who is a Liverpool fan. There's something behind this. It's not just like this, by accident. It's not like, people are saying, okay, I'm going to cheer for this group, and the other people from the other group, I like them, they're nice and good people, I'm just cheering for my group. No, you hate them. They're your enemy, and you're their enemy, and everyone who loves Liverpool is your friend. So this is like a tendency that human beings, and again, think of your own kin, think of your family. You would put them their interest before the interest of anyone else. even if we are all one nation.
Turn that argument around and say that, okay, you mentioned Liverpool. I'm actually a Chelsea fan, so
Okay.
times in the past when I've gone to Chelsea matches, and okay, we've had racism on in the terraces. There's no question about that, but the point is that you have Chelsea fans who are black, you have Chelsea fans who are from all corners of the globe, and we are all supporting one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So do you not see that kind of like undermines your argument in a way? I mean, I know you're arguing that the people are prone to wanting to join groups, but not on the basis necessarily of ethnicity.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely. Not on a basis, again,
or color or you know, religion.
But it can be on different levels. It can be I'm let's say I'm a patriot, a British patriot, or an Israeli patriot, or I'm an American patriot, and I am also a Liverpool fan. You know, it doesn't negate each other. So as long as it's not negating, you know, you cannot be a patriot, or like let's say an Israeli patriot, and then like a group of neo-Nazis. There's like a football club which is supported by many anti-Semites, and you know they do a Heil Hitler. I don't think you'll see any patriot Israeli that would you know, like that team, because there's a collision over there. However, this brings me to a point that I wish to make before. What you're proposing actually negates something that you mentioned in your video. The video, probably people, we should remind you that this conversation began when Eric made a video about multiculturalism on his channel that you need to go and watch. And at the end of that video, mentioned that you love the fact that you are living in a multicultural space where you see many cultures. People are different from you, and they have different backgrounds, traditions, food, etc., and that enriches your world. So if you want to destroy all borders and maybe even turn the entire human population into one nation, one single nation, then you're negating the very idea, which is I'm enjoying the fact that different tribals, different cultures give us something that we don't have as a single culture.
Well, you're absolutely right. I can't dispute that. But I think that's an inevitable part of our future. You don't think that that's an inevitable part of our future?
What, to have like one huge nation? No, again, I don't see it happening. Because of the of the biological factor that drives us to.
You don't think that? I mean, there've been sort of scientific studies and you know, news reports, and people have spoken a lot about how, you know, in the future mankind will become grey. Isn't it inevitable that we are all going to interbreed with each other, and that is our future?
That depends on future cultures, I guess. If to have the entire thing mixed, you'll need to have, now you have like 1 billion Chinese people in China, and you have 1 billion Arabs in the Middle East, and you have 1 million or 1 billion, let's say, I don't know the exact number, but 1 billion, let's say 1 billion white people in Europe, Canada, and the United States. So in order to everyone to be gray, you need to have all these areas mixed together in a way that, you know, there wouldn't be any more one race concentrated in one area. For this to happen, something extremely bizarre needs to happen, which is half of the Chinese population needs to, or a third of the Chinese population and a third of the African population needs to come into white areas, and they all need to mix together all the time. I don't see that happening. Look at the United States. Blacks are preferring to be with black people. White people prefer to be with white people. And again, I don't think it's a racist thing. I think it's a natural tendency of people to be around people which they feel are closer to them, ethnically, racially.
I don't know the statistics of, you know, black people with black people and white people in the US. I really don't know anything about that. But from my perspective, if this if life on this planet goes on for long enough, I can't see how it isn't inevitable. I just can't see that. I really can't really comprehend that. I can understand that there are some communities that might be cut off or decide to live in separated communities. I can see that happening, that there is even some political movement within each country where people will want to preserve their communities, and that they might even live in isolated communities. But for the rest of the planet, I can't see.
Well, they don't need to live in isolated communities per se. All they need to do is just have this cultural, strong cultural thing that, you know, they are trying to preserve their race, or I don't know, or nationality or ethnicity, and just stick together.
I mean, how much do you know about Japan?
Not a lot, to be honest, but I can tell you about, for example, Jewish ethnicity. Jewish ethnicity is not a race by any means. It has many races in it. Sort of a mixed race. However, the ethnicity is always you know, Jewish people tend to marry other Jews. So there is kind of a mixture, but it's very, yeah, it's not deep enough.
Isn't Israel like 75% Jewish? I mean,
yeah, but the rest are Arabs.
That's kind of inevitable that they're going to, you know, I mean, the chances are, what, 3 out of 4 that they're going to marry?
I'm not talking about Israeli Jews in Israel. I'm talking about Jews in America, for example.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jews in America.
Usually they will marry a Jew, man would marry a Jew woman, and vice versa. That would be usually the case. Jews are a very close ethnic group. They are, you know, it's not like if you're going to marry a Christian, white Christian or a black Christian, you know, they will shun you or anything like that, but unless you're Orthodox. But it's not usually, I don't know, I don't want to say acceptable, but it's not usually, lost the word. It doesn't really happen quite often.
Right.
Because it's, again, it's a cultural thing.
I mean, I mentioned Japan because it's, well, it is quite similar in some ways to what you're saying about Jews. And the Japanese are quite insular, and they are quite keen on preserving their own culture. And, you know, occasionally it goes towards, you might interpret it as intolerance of other cultures, and you have all kinds of other issues to do with the Second World War and so on, as far as Japan is concerned, and what happened, and whether they've had a national discussion about, you know, war crimes and all of these types of things. But I've gone off in the wrong direction.
You can say the same thing about Muslims, by the way. They usually prefer to, or very, very strong tendency to marry other Muslims. And Muslims are 99% either African, North African, or African, or Middle Eastern.
Right. Yeah. What I was going to say about Japan was that there is a kind of big difference between Japan and Israel, and that is the immigration policy. And this is why Japan is, in my view, and I think in the view of a lot of people, is that it's in a lot of danger, because what you see in Japan is, I'm not sure of the statistics, but I would say that it's probably above 75% Japanese. I can't. In fact, I'd be pulling those statistics out of my ass. But
okay, let's assume that this is the number.
But yeah, I mean, they have a very tight immigration policy, and but the point I'm trying to make is that they are an aging population.
That's true. They're not breeding,
and they are not having children.
Right.
And these two together are very dangerous. And the third element, the thing that saves countries that are actually going about things in that way, is immigration. And they have one of the tightest immigration policies, well, I think, on the planet. And these factors altogether make it inevitable, in my view, that some years down the line, Japan will be forced to accept mass migration to their country. Just talking about the workforce, you know, because the country will be in economic collapse if they don't if they don't get.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that.
Mm.
And by the way, people in the comment section are saying that it's over 90%. But still, yes, they have a problem, and it is a known. I don't know if it's a scientific, completely scientific fact, but nations that are shrinking in size, they reach a point of no return, and they cannot grow back to be. They'll eventually disappear. This has happened in the past, by the way, many times.
I'm very concerned about Japan. I mean, it's not a country that I'm completely in love with or anything, but it worries me so much to see the way that they are sleepwalking to disaster. And they're not actually altering slowly their immigration policy. But
then, if you think about it, if they'll let a group, immigration, and bring a huge group of people in, and they won't mix with them, eventually you would lose the Chinese people anyway. Either the new group will take over, or the new group would completely mix with the Japanese people, and you won't have the Japanese people.
But this is
like
what
they
I'm
were before.
You see, the longer they leave it, the more they will have to accept in. Unless they unless they started yesterday, that there's no alternative. And I worry that once they do accept mass migration, which they will be forced to, that there will be conflict. And it will be kind of a justified conflict in a way, because there will be a lot of people coming to work, and they will be going to those places in Japan where everyone is concentrated in the cities. So
you know what I think? I think maybe there's a third option here, which is the Japanese government would, in a way, force people to have children. And in a way, I'm saying, because Japanese people are not Westerners. If they are told to do something, they're very docile. They are very, they very how do you call when they obey authority?
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to go down that way.
But I think it's a possibility, that the government would encourage, on one hand, people to have kids, and punish people, maybe monetarily, people who don't have children. So it will force people to have children eventually, and grow out of that phase where young Japanese men and women don't want to have children.
Yeah, they don't even want to have interaction with each other.
Yeah.
You have all these guys with those robots.
Sex robots, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, all of that kind of stuff in their culture, it just adds up to so much trouble. And I think in our lifetimes, we're going to see some serious problems in Japan. And there will be the whole debate concerning with multiculturalism and to do with migration. And I mean, even today, they have kind of the opportunity in some ways to, they haven't really, what's the word? They haven't taken their responsibilities very seriously with the migration crisis. They could have been quite selective. They can actually try to get the youngest and most qualified Syrians, let's say, siphon those people off. I know that most countries are trying to do that because they don't want the, less educated ones, for example. But they could try to do that and to bring some small numbers in. But Japan has been actively trying to resist.
Well,
facing up to their
think of it this way: Syrian people, as much as they are, far away from the Western world, they have notion of the Western world. They understand the West, because they have internet. They probably watch a lot of Hollywood, movies. So even though they are coming from a different background or a different culture, they understand Western culture very well. So it kind of eases their adjustment when they're coming into Europe or into the United States. But to bring anyone from the West or from the Middle East, even from the Middle East to Japan, would be very difficult.
Yeah, I get what you mean. The culture shock would be tremendous.
Exactly.
But
so they would be segregated in a way anyway.
People have done it, and I'm not talking about large numbers here, but Japan has to start somewhere, and it's had a kind of opportunity, if you can put that word in inverted commas, in this situation. And again, it's kind of chosen that kind of isolationist approach, which it's really not helping the country, man.
But
It's
this
bad.
brings this. I'm sorry for cutting you, but this brings us back to the point, which is, would you like Japan to stay Japanese with all their craziness, their beautiful craziness, their food, their anime films, and their amazing culture, or would you like it to become a sort of a Syrian culture, which is a different thing, or
I don't
I
think
don't
it's a
know, every,
choice. I don't think that one culture rides over the other in the way that you kind of suggested there. I think that cultures become mixed. I don't think there is this one culture sort of taking over, a kind of bogeyman, if you know what I mean.
I think Europe is a good example why it's not the case. When you are looking at the Muslim population, especially in cities like Malmo in Sweden, Montformet in Paris, probably Luton in the UK, and maybe many other places where they are just closing themselves inside closed communities. They are staying. I don't know if you know about Rosengard Malmo, but this place, I saw a documentary. A guy went in there, and a journalist, and the young people that came from Iraq to Sweden, they said, well, we just brought Iraq here. We thought that we will come to Sweden
Mm.
and we'll enjoy everything that Swedes enjoy, Western good life and so on and so forth. But it's now a closed place where the police won't go in. There's gangs in the
You
streets.
mentioned this before, and I kind of like gave a little bit of a listen to our previous conversation, and I can agree with you on those points that you were making. I think the point that you particularly made was about people when they want to move to a place because they have a desire for, I don't know, the language, or because someone wants to go to the UK because they love William Shakespeare, or someone loves French tradition. And I really, I think that's a good point. As opposed to someone who has been forced from their home, or somebody who is, living in poverty and so on. And for them, they just know they want to get out of there, which is completely normal. Any of us would want to do that, and they want to go to a country where the standard is higher and the economic.
They'll receive welfare and housing and everything.
Well, at that stage, I'm not even sure that welfare would be a primary concern, but any kind of life has to be better life than some dilapidated home where you have guys with I don't know, machine guns and whatever else that are approaching.
Maybe if in an extreme situation like you're saying, like Syria, for example, when people are dropping bombs on your head, then everywhere else would be much better.
Yeah.
Even if you're not without welfare. But a lot of people are coming from North Africa, and it's not that they have like this kind of life. They may be living in a poor country, and they are poor, and they're thinking, well, I can live here and be very, very poor in a poor country, or I can go to a rich country and get a lot of money immediately, and I don't even need to learn the language to do that. Now, the thing is, I believe that people still have the tendency to want to stay where they grew up, where they were born.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean,
and I'll take myself for example. A lot of Israelis say, well, Israel has become a very stinky place to live in. We are paying there are a lot of taxes here. Life is very expensive in Israel. People cannot get an apartment. People are working hard, not getting enough money to live properly. And they're thinking to themselves, well, I can go to Europe. I'm educated. I can go to the United States, be an engineer, be whatever, and live. And I've witnessed that, because when I went to the United States, when my company sent me there, I noticed that with the money that if I'm selling my apartment, my small apartment, I can buy a big house, two great cars, live a much better life in the United States. And yet I won't do it, because I still very much emotionally attached to the place that I lived. And I think that the same goes to the people who are living in the Middle East or in North Africa. They're not so inclined to go to a cold place like Sweden, where everything is foreign. Yet they still do it because they are incentivized by free money. and a better chance for life?
I don't know. I mean, I think your emphasis on free money, and when you say that, it just sounds a little bit too cynical. I honestly think that that isn't the overriding priority for them.
So why would you speculate that someone from Morocco or from Tunisia, places, I think Tunisia has a secular democratic government
Well,
right now, why would they?
don't you think that most people actually go to other countries intending to work? I mean, how is that free money?
Well, it depends on the country that you're going to. If you're going to the United States, probably you need to make it on your own, because the United States will not provide you with everything you need.
No, I'm talking about the intentions of the person that leaves the country that they're from.
Yeah, but the intentions.
I mean, do people really want to? You know, they think, oh, well, my ambition in life is to go to blah blah blah, and I can get free money. I think, you know,
yeah, there's a spectrum of people out there. There are people who are like, I'm going to the United States to to live the American dream, which is work hard and then get somewhere in life, not be poor, become maybe working class, then maybe middle class, and my kids would be upper class.
I think it would be much safer to say that most people would go abroad to want to improve their lives. I don't think that most people go looking for free money. I think that's kind of too cynical, man. I really do.
But wait. Well, let's stay with that. What you said doesn't contradict each other. Have a better life and get free money doesn't contradict each other.
Well,
there are ways to.
Nor would getting a job in that case. So why didn't you say get a job?
Okay, so again, I don't want to do any generalization about people's motivation. I don't want to.
I think you did.
Yeah, so I'm not taking it. Not taking it back. I'm just trying to get it more focused.
Okay, man. In fact, it's probably that you just said that because that was one of the first things that came into your mind.
Yeah, I maybe now I'm just making it more clear to myself, maybe even. What I'm trying to say is that, like, I don't want to speculate what people in Western Africa, what their culture is telling them, because I believe it's a cultural thing. If you have a culture which tells you, take what they give you, like like the famous quote from Pirates of the Caribbean. Take what you can, leave give nothing back. So if you live in, I'm not saying that this is the culture that people from the Middle East are coming from, but I'm not trying to speculate if they are. Yeah, we are on. Our culture is hard work. And again, I can make. I'm going on a tangent here, maybe, but you can look at the American people, the Japanese people, and the European people. You can see a clear distinction of how much hard work a nation is willing to do. Japanese people work 18 hours. Americans work 11, 10, 11, 12 hours each day. Europeans work 7, 8 hours, and then they make laws that would prohibit other people from working more than that.
What's wrong with that, man?
I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm showing you how
more free time, more time to spend with your family and so on.
There's a huge argument over there, not argument, discussion about that topic, and you need to find a balance. If you go and listen to Dennis Prager give a speech about 10 ways liberalism is bad for you. He has some good points. You may not agree with everything he says, but he has some good points. For example, I don't know if I mentioned it in the last conversation, because I have a feeling that I did. He mentioned that Europeans entered in the human rights. Human right would be to have a vacation in a different country. That's a basic human right for Europeans. I think the EU put it somewhere in there. I don't know. But European people are very, very aware of their, private time, about their not working too hard. And there's even a funny thing that I heard from in a company that I work for, an Israeli CEO mentioned that he went to France when he was younger to a company that was on the brink of bankruptcy, a high-tech company. And they had 1 week to try to set up a demo of their product, and if that would work, and you know the other companies would be convinced, then they would receive money, and the company would still be, you know, able to continue. And they had a week to finalize that demo, and they had a lot of work. So what happened is the CEO of that company called all the workers. That this was on Friday, and brought them into the office and told them, listen, we have 1 week to finish this demo and make it good. Otherwise, this company is going to become bankrupt, and every one of you are going to get fired. So I expect every one of you to be here 8 o'clock next Monday and start working on that demo. Now, that might not sound too weird to a European, but to an Israeli or an American or to a Japanese person, it would be, you know, just, you know, there's a huge bell ringing in our heads. What do you mean Monday morning? If the company needs to survive, they need to work from this moment until next week, non-stop, because their livelihood depends on it. So, so you see what I mean? There's culture can make you a hard worker or a lazy bum.
But this is an interesting kind of aspect of it for me. Is it your contention that it's the culture that you come from that makes you that way, or the culture that you go to?
Well, it's a good question. I think it's the culture that you're coming from. The culture that you're going to, you need to adapt to that culture. Otherwise, you won't, you know, be able to manage.
Can I just give you an example?
Okay.
So post Second World War, as I mentioned actually in my video, in Germany, there were huge building projects, and many thousands of Turks and Serbs, Croats, Bosnians, and many others came to work in Germany. Perhaps you know what I'm about to say. Now, in those countries, I mean, it's not very nice to generalize also, but the work ethic in Turkey and the Balkan countries is not considered to be very high. They're a relaxed type of people. However, when they went over to work in Germany, they worked like lunatics. They were considered to be the best workers.
Interesting, very interesting.
And this happens a lot. This is a story that you can hear quite a lot of people that are from these types of countries, and they work like dogs when they move to these other countries.
That's very interesting. I need to think about that.
I think it is worth thinking about, because that's also to do with the idea of, you know, assimilation and of.
But do you think they realize that they're just coming in to work and then go back to their own country, or they were promised to receive, you know, citizenship or something like that?
Well, in the case of Germany, in many cases, they weren't actually given citizenship. I think we spoke about that.
So they were not actually trying to assimilate. Maybe they were trying to keep their jobs.
Well, they weren't trying to assimilate because they weren't given the option to assimilate. They weren't.
I realized that, but they knew it as well, probably.
Well, they weren't given access to German public services, so they had nothing to owe to Germany beyond their employer, really. But yeah, I mean, they did their jobs and they worked hard. And in some cases, well, I think probably in many cases, as time went past, they were granted citizenship, or their children were granted citizenship, even if initially they weren't. And some people were sent back, obviously.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if you know this information or not, but something similar happens in Israel when you get people from the Far East coming in to become construction workers or agricultural workers, because Israelis are not, you'll never see an Israeli working in construction unless he's the boss for some reason.
Right. Okay.
Or there was, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I have this tendency to ramble.
No.
But but they did an experiment in Israel. It was a TV show. They offered people who don't have work. You know, they went to the government and asked for work, and complained about not getting proper work. And this guy comes and tells them, well, you want to work, earn some, you know, more than the average wage. Let's say 50% more than the average wage. Let's go and pick, you know, and just pick fruits, or, you know, work in a greenhouse. And they said, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it. And they were young people. So they brought them to this greenhouse at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
After they brought like 50 people. And until noon, no one stayed. Everyone left. You know, no one wanted to work in that.
Oh, wow.
And we have people from Thailand coming here and working. They work like, you know, like maniacs in 40 degrees Celsius, 12 hours, you know. So we have, so sorry for, again, so we have people that came here, but then what happens is a lot of foremen would take away their passports and would not return their passports until they are doing, you know.
Okay, that's one way of making sure the job gets done.
Yeah, because, you know, they pay for that Thai worker they pay for that, let's say, plane ticket or something like that, or the visa, or, you know, the taxes or whatever, you know, to bring a foreign employee, and then they would hold them until they would repay that debt and work some more. So they kind of have this, incentive, which I think it's awful, yeah. But I wonder if that happened in Germany as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Another example I could give, for example, international workers from Western countries or from wherever in, say, war zones, let's just say working for the UN or European Union organizations. For example, I'm giving Kosovo as an example again, as I did in the previous video that we did, Hangout. So they go to Kosovo, which is one of the most corrupt places in Europe, sadly, and rather than implement their high Western standards, they themselves become involved in corruption. And this is something that we see around the world. We don't see people coming from Western countries with their supposedly higher cultural or moral standards and bringing those forward in third world type of countries. We actually see them going down to that level and joining in, you know, basically.
Yeah, well, it's much.
I'd say going down to that level, I should kind of correct myself. I'm not talking about the level of the country. I'm talking about the level of corruption.
Well, it's very easy to get corrupted. Much more easier to get corrupted than to adopt, higher values.
I mean, it is, but when your very reason of being there is to actually improve corruption, it's a much worse state of affairs, you know, and. Yeah, I mean,
politics is usually like that. It's inevitable eventually. You know, with power, money eventually will corrupt. So it's not, you're not talking about individuals. You're talking about now more institutions or governments and stuff like that.
Well, kind of, but you know, these individuals do make a choice to behave in that way, and if they are from societies where corruption is frowned upon. And if they are working for organizations which are supposed to improve corruption in these communities, in these countries that have been in the middle of war or whatever, then it doesn't really say very much for our
humanity,
civilized societies. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, imagine that you're sending 100 people from Germany who are, you know, honest people, hard workers, into a place, let's say, on the other side of the planet, where everyone is on the you know, taking bribes, everything is corrupted, there's not much to do, and they just can, you know, mix in or leave. So some people will probably leave, and some people will probably stay and, you know, enter this cycle of corruption. It makes sense. It's very easy to corrupt people. It's very easy.
It is very easy, but this kind of goes to my argument as to it's not necessarily where you're born. and you don't necessarily take those values with you.
I agree. I agree. I agree. Again, but then you still have different cultures in different places behaving differently.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are tendencies in all cultures and trends, you know, where you see more of one thing than another.
And you can just look at Japanese people. These people are insane. They put kids in schools from age 3 to study, you know, mathematics and reading and writing and science, and they are, you can even say, indoctrinating their kids to become hard workers.
I'm gonna, you just reminded me of something. I'm gonna say something I hope that isn't considered to be quite ignorant or some kind of a stereotype, but you reminded me of a study that I heard of a long time ago, and something I'd noticed from when I was quite little, and I hope this doesn't sound offensive in any way, but it would be quite often I would notice that Jewish people would be wearing glasses, that they are short-sighted. And I'd kind of noticed this. I mean, obviously, you don't know who a Jew is necessarily. And that sounds so un-PC. I know, I'm sorry if I'm
this is the most un-PC channel you can think of. So you're in a good, you know, in a friendly place.
You know, this advocate of social justice is about to stereotype an entire.
Did you watch my video called that was satiring? I think it was not MTV, but Cracked. I can't remember the original. I think it was MTV.
I'm not sure.
I was making a video which was I can't even remember the name. Jesus, I'm so senile. I'm 41. Okay. Gentiles from around the world respond to Jew, which was satirizing black people from around the world respond to, or people of color from around the world respond to white.
Right.
It was BuzzFeed. Thank you, people. And I was so on PC when it was, you know, I was making a lot of anti-Semite comments. It was a satire, of course, but still.
Right. No, I must have missed that one. I'll have to watch it.
Yeah. Then don't worry.
No, I was actually going to make a vaguely serious point. I was going to, which kind of like rescues me slightly. So I had kind of noticed this independently. I'd never even read about it or anything. And then one day I came across an article. This is many years ago. I think it's probably in a newspaper that I read before the internet, although hopefully something like this exists on the internet to substantiate what I'm saying. And basically, someone did a test. Someone else had noticed that quite a few Jewish people were short-sighted. So they did these tests and they did some questionnaires and so on. And they came to the conclusion that it was because that particularly in the more religious families, they are asking children or telling children to read, oh my God, I don't even know what the Jewish
Torah
is, the Torah, from a very early age.
That's true.
That this has the effect of creating short-sightedness. And I kind of, when I read that, I kind of pat myself on the back thinking, you know what, you noticed that before everyone else did.
Well, it's actually very true that Orthodox Jews, especially in Israel, there are a lot of them, most of them, or the majority of them are not even working. Their main goal in life is to have everyone study the Torah.
Right, yeah,
So,
I hear there is a bit of resentment in Jewish society or Israeli society, sorry, about those.
Yes, because we need to fund that. We are funding it from taxpayers' money.
By the tone in your voice, not least by your very self.
Oh, no, of course, for every, I guess, almost every secular, non-Orthodox Jew in Israel, which is the great majority in Israel, is resenting this fact. The thing is that they have this small yet very powerful party in the parliament, which is like the balancing force. So they always get extort. You know, they will go with any government, usually the right-wing government, but they'll support any government if they get money, and they get a lot of money. So let's say you got one of the biggest parties want to create a coalition and to form a government, then they'll just take their 10% of their votes as like a default, on board. No matter what they do, it's like they are buying votes. They are buying their government using money, and this money goes to fund. It's called yeshivas, where they study the Torah day and night, and don't produce anything. But yeah, this probably is the main reason why most of them are short-sighted. By the way, I'll give you another study. Let's see your reaction to this study. Jews, especially European Jews, have an IQ, an average IQ, usually something like 20 points more than white people. And that's because the reasoning behind that, a guy who studied it, and there's a great documentary series called Brainwash by this Norwegian guy who was with a tendency to be progressive, but he wants to explore the other side of the argument. So he looks at the gender inequality imbalances, and why women don't go to STEM and why men go to STEM and women go to become nurses. And then he made another documentary about races, and just look for it. It's on Vimeo, Brainwash, and you'll find it. It's a great documentary series. And this guy was studying this phenomenon, and he said that what happened is Jewish communities in Europe in the Middle Ages, during the Middle Ages, were very segregated. They were very closed, and Jews only married other Jewish people. And what happened is that what they usually did, the custom was to take the son of the rabbi, which was the smartest boy, and marry it to the daughter of another rabbi who was the smartest woman. Right. And then what happened circumstantially is that these families had the most children. So poor families had less children, and rich and smart families had more children.
This is the opposite of today's trends.
Yeah, I have a Russian friend that claims that Russians dumb themselves using wrong breeding, but that's a different story. But what the point is that I'm trying to make is, because they had more kids, and intelligence is inherited. Ted? I don't know if it's a Ted. No. Sorry. Then eventually it's by sheer numbers that more intelligent people were, the numbers grew because there were less. There was just the statistical thing, and that's why Jews tend to have 20 or 20-something points on average more than white people.
That's very interesting.
And here's another inconvenient fact that a lot of people who are from the left have a problem to consider, is that on average white people have like 20 to 25 points more on IQ tests than black people, and they want to their explanation is that the tests are more fitted to white people. That's the rationality.
This is like black people all over the world, or black people in
all over the world, no matter where they're coming from, no matter if they're middle class or working class. This is all over the world. And by the way, I think number one are the Asians. I think Japanese or Chinese are number one on the average. I can't remember who's number 2 or 3. Jews are somewhere in between 2 or 3. European Jews, not Jews that came from the Middle East or Africa, by the way. And this is very, very inconvenient, a very inconvenient fact when you are trying to argue that human brains are identical. And but people won't be so, feel so difficult with the fact that black people are much more athletic than I can tell you by a certain, from Jews, and that's like in 2 orders of magnitude, because I know Jews, they are terrible at sports. But if you look at the NBA, you'll see 99% black people, because they're more athletic. They're much more built for that game.
Yeah,
so people don't have.
I remember reading some reports recently. I don't know if it were based on a study or based upon some, is it anthropological explanations, or I don't know. It's to do with, the slave trade and so on. Is that familiar to you?
No.
Well, the speculation was, and I'm not saying that this is correct or not, and I read it quite some time ago, but the speculation is when you're talking about, God, this sounds patronizing, but if you're talking about blacks in the United States or in countries where there was a slave trade, and you're talking about physical differences, this is the way I remember it. If I've got it wrong, then please forgive me. That part of the reason why you have superior athletic abilities is because of on the slave ships, for example. Weeks and months, I guess, went by as people were going, and the ones that were the weakest died out, and the ones that were stronger, they continued the lineage. And that's just one. I mean, I have no idea of the arguments, how strong that is, or if there is a counter argument.
Makes sense. Let's begin with it. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense even. And I would take it even further and ask you, do you notice that every time they have a marathon, you got 1,000 guys and one guy from Kenya, which is like 2 kilometers ahead? It's always that guy from Kenya.
Well, Kenya and 1 or 2 neighboring countries, I think, also.
Exactly. So it's more than a coincidence that this happens 99% of the time.
But then, there are other factors. It doesn't necessarily just have to be because of race. It's also to do with bone structure. It's also to do with whether you are born at altitude. You have to look at the whole picture. I think it's a danger of going too much on this. Well,
but a certain area where you have altitude and bone structure would be very tied with race. It's kind of an inevitability.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. I mean, your color isn't dependent on whether you're born at altitude and your bone structure is thin. Because the kind of black people you're talking about are black people with very thin bone structure. We're not talking about the ones that are running 100 meters who are, very muscular. And oh God, I don't know if I really want to talk about this. This just sounds like I'm, generalizing and being overly patronizing. I don't mean to be too PC, but I'm not.
Okay.
I mean, you can talk about it if you want, but I think.
Well, I'll just.
In a more informal setting, I'd probably be happier to discuss this.
Okay, but just speculating that you can take that idea that you talked about in that ship where the strong survived, and I can say the same thing about probably the Holocaust and Israeli Jews. Maybe take that idea and transfer it to that, but you can say it about culture would drive people to be more like one thing than another thing. If you have a culture which reveres wisdom, and only wise, smart, intelligent people are more prone to procreate, and in another culture, the strong people, maybe the more athletic people, are more prone to procreate, then they would pass these genes on, and then you'll get a distinction. Now, I can give, and maybe we should end this specific topic here, but I'm thinking about something that I heard on a TED Talk, a guy that said that we are accelerating natural evolution now.
Right.
Because what happens in the West right now is that people are just not mixing randomly. Now you are going into a website, and if you're an intelligent person, let's say that you're very intelligent and successful and everything, you're going into this website and you'll find a mate which is intelligent and successful because this is what you're looking for. So we are artificially now, with the power of the internet, increasing human evolution, let's say intellectuality. I can't remember the name of that TED talk, but he said about the exponential evolution of the human brain, and it's a very interesting TED talk. So imagine that happens in the West, and it's not happening in Africa or in the Middle East. What happens in 10 generations from now? You'll see a huge difference. So then you'll have a situation where what you're talking about, everything would become gray, would not even come close to that. So it's very hard to predict the future. We cannot even start to think what, the circumstances would be that would shape the far future in terms of society, culture, etc.
Well, we kind of, I suppose, slightly disagree on this. I do believe in that inevitable joint future of ours, inevitable grey future of ours, although it will be resisted. And you were asking me before about whether it's something that I necessarily welcome, and it's a bit of a contradiction. And you're right, it is a contradiction, because I like the idea that people are unique. I like the idea that people are different. And yet, on the other hand, I know in my heart that everyone is the same. And I want for us to be, to have shared experiences. I want for people to be kind of together. That's our destiny. And if that's a contradiction, then
so let's play with that idea. Let's say that you have now in one state, you have a few cultures. Would you prefer them to mix, or would you prefer them to preserve their own cultures?
If you ask me that question today, I mean, whether I would prefer them, I mean, it's not really for me. It's not for me to, decide or to say. But I would rather that they would support being with or loving someone based on that person's individual characteristics. I wouldn't support people that were, white is right, or, separate.
Oh, of course.
I don't support that.
It's a different thing. Bigotry and multicultural, different cultures, or being I don't think that by default, if you're a national person, like you're a conservative person, wants to conserve his lineage, heritage, and want to stay the same in the future like you were in the past, but minus the bigotry. I don't see it, clashing necessarily. I know that it's very correlated. It's very correlated that people who are very nationalists are also very bigoted. And it makes sense in a way, because they see themselves, their nationality, their heritage as the superior one. It's like a natural human thing, maybe even a cultural thing. Well, but it's not necessarily linked together. You might have one without the other.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. I don't know if I agree with you 100%, but
what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this?
I don't know how to respond.
Okay.
So you should probably.
I think your microphone is cutting off again. We'll need to continue in 2 weeks. I'm just joking.
Nice one. Well, let's talk a little about something else then. That's also related. Right. Okay. Let's see how you handle this.
Okay.
Okay. So in our first discussion, I don't know if you remember, you said that many Arabs stayed in what was to become Israel, or what is now Israel.
Yes.
80% of Palestinians were fled or expelled from Israel.
I don't know the numbers, but let's go with that.
Yeah, I mean, because you kind of gave me the impression that it was like the other way, but this is a very small amount. I mean, it's a very big amount, so the 80%, but it's a very small amount of people that actually remained.
Well, I don't know what you got, where you got the number 80%, but when they fled to a very close proximity, maybe the west, the Gaza or the West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
So they fled to a place where they were supposed to create their own state. But let's go with that number for the sake of the argument. Let's go with 80%.
But because in the context of multiculturalism, when you said that multiculturalism started at the beginning of the Israeli state, right? So it just seems to be odd that multiculturalism can begin with the mass expulsion.
Well, the intention was not to, you know, the European noble idea of multiculturalism according to Merkel. It was just circumstantial. What happened was we need to think now in terms of people who lived during World War II, and at that period in time, there were many ethnical cleanses, and there were many, you know, nations just mass transferred the masses of people of nationalities and ethnics from one place to another. This happened all around the Middle East. It happened all around Europe, and it was not uncommon. It was practiced all the time. So this is just another case. But circumstantially, what happened is that there were a substantial number of, it wasn't like, you know, 1%, but there were a substantial number of Arabs that stayed inside Israel. They received citizenship, and from that point on, organically, it kind of happened. You know, the multiculturalism, because it could have veered to a civil war eventually. You could have a civil war or insurgents inside Israel, like what happened in the UK with Ireland, Northern Ireland. It could have happened in the 50s, in the 60s, but it didn't. What happened is that they got along eventually, and got along pretty well. And now, look at what happened. We got a quarter of the population are Arabs, and they're not taking over. You know, they're not, you know, starting to become crazy and trying to take over. They enjoy very much the fact that they're Israelis, that they're not, you know, Syrians or Jordan, and they understand that. They understand that the freedoms that they are getting in the only democracy in the Middle East, and the only Western country in the Middle East.
But that's because it's the type of multiculturalism that ensures that there is always a large majority of the host population, right? Which isn't really a kind of multiculturalism that fits the multiculturalist mold.
What is the multiculturalist mold?
Well, I think that they don't actually have, well, most nation states that claim to be multiculturalist don't have as an objective to keep a large majority as original, I don't know if you can call them original, but hosts of that particular country. It's not the native population, because obviously native populations are something that don't exist any.
I understand I think I understand what you're getting at, but if you think about Israel, which is a unique place because you have the Jews, which is an ethnic group, one ethnic group, and you have the Arabs, which is another ethnic group. Do Europeans consider themselves to be an ethnic group? Are Germans an ethnic group? Maybe they are. Because people say white people, they forget that white people are, it's a very, very huge generalization of many different ethnic groups, maybe. Right? Because Americans are not like Swedes, and Swedes are not like Russians, maybe. And in Britain, British people are not like Italian people. I don't know if Italian people are considered white.
I think they are, but
because it's the Levant, you know, it's part of the Levant, I guess. But let's say that they're white. Italians and British people, they're white, but they're not the same ethnic group. So would you consider it that would you consider that in Britain, when they are bringing in Muslims, they want them to become what? A part of the ethnic white British group, or do they expect them to be British?
No, I don't think they think that at all. I mean, when you use the word white, I don't know in what way you're actually using that, but as
Yeah,
soon as you use that word, it's kind of like it comes out of contention. No, they don't.
That's true. That's true. The word white is out of place here.
Mm.
But ethnically British. And what is ethnically British?
Are they expected to be ethnically British? You're talking about the people that live in the UK. Do they expect Muslims specifically to become ethnically British?
Yeah, it's impossible, right?
God, it's a hard question to answer.
It's almost impossible to happen. You need to mix so much to make it gray in order to that, and still have the ethnically British traditions and songs and traditions and heritage be the strong one and the one that prevails, and the other one would just need to amalgamate itself a little bit into a mostly British ethnicity.
But it does happen, and it happens it can happen within 2 generations. You know,
it happens. Jewish ethnicity has a lot of traditions that were borrowed from places they were in. Still considered Jewish, ethnicity. For example, I can give you an example. When we're celebrating Passover, at the end of Passover, the Jews from Morocco celebrate another day, another kind of celebration, which is only for Moroccan Jews. So you can say that maybe they borrowed it from or made it up when they were in Morocco.
Right, yeah.
So it happens, it happens.
I've got another question.
Go ahead, shoot.
Right, so this is also kind of related to Israel. So when we're talking about multiculturalism in Israel, I mean, is it really multiculturalism, or is it more like nation building?
I don't think I understand the question.
Okay, so I'm talking about most of the people that arrive in Israel are Jews.
That's right.
Do you understand what I mean when I'm saying nation building?
Well, yeah, to keep the Jewish majority, if that's what you're trying to say.
Yes, and
yes, the idea behind it is very much
preserve the idea of a kind of Jewish society.
Yes, the idea is exactly.
Is that really multicultural?
Well, even if not, you're not going to ignore that that the quarter of the population is Arab, and they actually are growing in respect to the Jewish community because they have more children. So I guess the idea behind bringing more Jews into Israel is to make sure that the Jewish majority would stay the majority.
Oh my goodness.
It sounds horrendous to you, but it makes a lot of sense to people in Israel, because we don't want to reach the day where one day the Muslims would be the majority and the Jews would be the minority. And then
I understand that you have that, and I understand why you have that kind of zero-sum mentality, because
it is a zero-sum game.
Yeah,
eventually.
I mean, it's too close to home. But I think that sometimes, if I may say so, I think that you apply your own mentality, which is entirely understandable in your circumstances, but I think you apply it too much to other countries.
Can you give an example?
Well, when we were talking last, you were presenting me with kind of situations and talking about the idea of war being on our doorsteps, and about how we would defend our own first of all, which is obviously we are all going to defend our own families and so on. But I think when you start going down that kind of route, it's not really very feasible. It's something that you can relate to and I can relate to a certain degree. But I honestly don't think that this is something that comes into consideration or is something that is likely to ever happen. You know, where you have a situation where there is so much, let's say, multiculturalism in inverted commas, because we're not using the correct definition in a way, but there is so much multiculturalism or immigration that the hordes of foreigners decide that they want to take over, and they kind of stamp down on the domestic population. Then there is a war, and you have to defend yourself and defend your families and so on. That was the kind of impression that you were giving me, and I can understand that in the context that you're living in. But I don't think that that is a real prospect in the vast majority of countries. Well, okay, in the Western world, let's say.
Okay, let's look at the situation right now. It all depends on. It doesn't depend on specifically on the term multiculturalism. It depends on how monolithic the two cultures become. If you are living in a country where you have, let's say, a third of the people are of one group, and it's a very segregated group, and they have their own traditions, their own culture, and they are looking at the other culture that they're living with at the same state as a hostile culture. And I can give you real life examples. Take Yugoslavia, take Czechoslovakia, take Iran, where you have Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds. Take Syria, you have the Alawite tribes, it's the minority, yet they were in power.
So you believe in these kind of mortal enemies based on ancient hatreds? You believe in that kind of...
I believe that eventually, when things go south in a country, in a state, in a civilization, when people have it bad, that if people have it good and everyone is happy, then this would not happen, or has a very, very low chance of happening. But we don't know what will happen in Europe 100 years from now. It might not be the pacifistic, open-minded place that it is today, or the rich place which is today. It could be a poor, broken place, and we have no idea what will happen 500 years from now. And at that point of time, if things go south and people are living very close to each other, but they are separate communities, a dictator might come into power, and that dictator would become like the Alawite tribes in Syria. They were the minority, and yet they came to power. Same thing happened in Iraq. The Sunnis came to power, but they were the minority, and they held the state by the point of the gun, by intimidating people, by a ruthless regime.
Yeah, I mean, anything could happen, really, and it doesn't have to be necessarily something negative where we end up, like killing each other.
By the way, that I'm sorry, a point that I was thinking, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but
yeah,
if you're looking at many of like the Muslim Brotherhood, you'll see them repeating the same strategy. Their whole strategy from the day they were created until this day, 100 years, for the last 100 years, is that we'll take over the world by numbers. We don't have to go on a rampage. We don't have to go on killing sprees or terror. We just need to conquer Europe with numbers, the world with numbers. This, you might say it's improbable or unfeasible. This is their plan. And everywhere they are bringing new mosques, and they are funding new mosques, and they are bringing in youth, people who are very impressionable, and they are putting ideas in their heads. This is what they're putting in their heads. So we are breeding a lot. Humanity is breeding. The Muslim Brotherhood is breeding.
These Muslim Brotherhood people, they don't have access to a hive mind. They can't force, even if we do have more Muslims living in Europe, they can't force those Muslims to somehow be connected to their war machine.
We don't need to force them. It can be circumstantial. Again, if you have a huge Muslim community which is segregated, and the people are poor and they are bored, and they have 200 mosques in their area preaching this shit, then eventually it would be very likely that they will be on board with it. This is just circumstantial. It all depends on the circumstances.
Well, you know, if you had 200 Muslims who are living in a certain area and they're all working for the same employer and they get sacked and then they go out on the rampage, I mean, this is also possible. Poverty can cause any kind of conflict, any amount of conflict. And you're right in showing that religion can be one of those spark points, but I'm not convinced that it necessarily has to do with religion. It might be that our next conflict might actually be to do with the fact that the richest in society are monopolizing the resources. It might be that people decide to revolt, all people together, no matter what their color or background.
So this raises an interesting question. What do you're looking at today at Syria, at Russia, at Iraq, at Turkey, and the United States, and you see a huge power play here. That the politics in the Middle East is going to a very bad place. And you got it sponsored by huge empires. Like you have the Americans and the Russians, and the Chinese even. Maybe they'll, enter this game. And the Middle East is burning, and it's not going to become any better anytime soon. So it looks like we got another Cold War coming on. So what are your thoughts on that?
If we have a situation where, let's say, the Chinese, Russians, and the Americans decide to conduct a war by proxy or a Cold War in the Middle East, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
which eventually would affect the United States, Europe, Russia, etc.
It depends on from which perspective you're asking me. I mean, if you were to put me in that situation, I would suggest that all three sides sit down and negotiate.
Oh, of course, but let's talk of reality. I'm not.
Okay, but can you give me some examples? What do you mean? Are you talking about population movements? Are you talking about people in the streets? I mean, I'm not sure if I understand what.
I'm thinking about the Middle East is going to drag the world into World War III. That's what I'm fearing.
Right.
And it might, start to permeate into Europe. Look at the Ukraine, maybe Sweden. I don't know. It seems very improbable right now, but I assure you that it was probably very improbable in the minds of people before World War I that such a thing could happen.
Don't we usually have a history of the world's policemen, that is the United States, injecting themselves into situations in the Middle East when everything starts to get really bad? I mean, that's not necessarily that they have a positive influence. In fact, well, I mean, from your perspective, maybe they do.
Okay.
But
we can argue about that.
From the perspective of others, they've had quite a negative influence. But is there not an argument to be made that these global powers actually sit down and talk before you get to that stage? Yeah, of course, there's a lot of grandstanding and things get really bad, but when it comes down to it, they pull back.
Well, I don't know. Right now, the situation between the United States and Russia has never been worse, so bad since the fall of the Iron Curtain.
Well, if Trump gets into power, I think that will be solved over.
yeah, and imagine if
he loves Putin. I think Putin loves him. Well, I know it's bullshit also, but I think there is some kind of mutual dictatorish type of admiration going on there.
But still, think what happened. Look at what happened. Now you have America putting sanctions on Russia, and that's why Russia is supporting, Assad, probably, as kind of getting back at the United States, maybe. I don't know. I don't fully understand the entire political thing. You should watch the Caspian report. It's amazing. It gives you a lot of information about that, and it's very objective. But there is definitely some kind of war between the United States and Russia right now. The invasion into the Ukraine was done, you know, and that's why probably the United States starts sanctioning Russia. Now Russia is trying to. Someone wrote, "Shut the fuck up, SkepTorr." Well, what do you want me to let?
That's what I was thinking. Just kidding. Go on, go on.
No. But I'm interested in your thoughts. I'm just rambling right now. This guy's right.
Oh God.
I'm just thinking out loud. That's a problem.
Well, it's okay to think out loud. I think everyone is thinking out loud, aren't they?
Yeah.
I don't know. What was the question?
Your thoughts on the Cold War that is coming.
The Cold War in the Middle East.
And don't try to be a wishful thinker like you always do.
Oh God, you know, I can't. Honestly, I like to give an informed opinion, and I can't really give you an informed opinion because I haven't been following this closely enough. I don't want to talk out of my ass.
Okay.
And I do know a little bit about the history and so on, but I'm not up to date with current events. I mean, I know about, you know, BB and other people in you know, who are in parts of power.
But I don't think it's completely impossible that in 10 years from now we'll see a world that you have the EU is banned, you know, is broken into different countries. No more EU. So you have countries in Europe, you know, fighting each other economically in an economical sense. You have Russia and the United States going at each other's throats, maybe via proxy, maybe economically. And then you got China in the mix as well. You got the Middle East burning. It doesn't look good.
Well, it doesn't look good, but wasn't this another one of those studies or some statistics I read? I think it might have been a year or 2 years ago, that despite our subjective impression of the way that the world is at the moment, there are actually less wars now than there has ever been in any time in history. You know, don't quote me on that, but I remember reading some kind of report of that kind, and you know, I was a little bit surprised, but I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, really. I mean, things seem bad, and you also have to bear in mind, you know, social media and what you're reading, and you have to think about yourself. I think you have to think about where were you a few years ago? Were you also equally as informed then? You know, if it seems like there are trends, it could be you that are reading those trends and that previously you weren't reading those trends.
I'm just looking at you know, very well-known facts. What happens in the Middle East, in Iraq and Syria, what happens in North Africa. It's you know, very blatant, very well-known facts that the Cold War, you can call it that, between Russia and the United States, something that wasn't there a few years ago. Since 1990 until, let's say, couple of years ago, the situation was much better. The EU was at a much better place. Greece was not bankrupt. Spain was not on the brink of bankruptcy. So it was a different situation. And you got a lot of stability in the Middle East, if you're thinking about it. You had all these dictatorships holding, you know, intact, you know, countries were very stable. Iraq, Syria, Egypt. Egypt is now stabilized, but it wasn't so stabilized a few years ago. And Libya, just, you know, going all to hell.
What can I say, man? The global system, it's capitalism, it's neoliberalism. It's time to change the global system.
Well, I'm trying to always take the pragmatic approach, not the one that I...
You know, we have been sort of like in this economic system which has kind of spread the values that we're talking about, which is causing some of the problems. We've been in this system since the 1970s, late 1970s onwards. We've had this type of economics, these type of neocon foreign policy, and so on. Perhaps it's time to actually change those policies and to see if something will change in the world if we do that.
I don't think we can do that. I think it's spun out of our control. And unless something very disastrous would happen, I don't see it changing. Well, as long as we're not, on the brink of, destroying humanity, I don't think it's going to change.
If we're not willing to try to change the global system, then we kind of deserve what we get, really. Don't you think?
Well, yeah, I think it's like a natural law. If people have it good, they would be lazy to change anything until, they cannot stand it anymore on a massive scale. And something really bad needs to happen. World War II, for example. It's a great example of, the economy of the world from the First World War, just, becoming worse and worse and worse and worse until it blows out the way it did. And from that, you got a lot of stability, and it's like the stock market. You go up, up, up until you have something and just breaks down because of corruption and the bubbles. You can call it maybe, I don't know, social bubbles. Eventually, they explode.
Yeah.
But the societies and everything in nature. I studied systems. Has the tendency to go out of stable equilibriums when a lot of force goes into it. So they get out of equilibrium, they just explode, and then they are settling down in a different equilibrium.
The problem is that equilibria doesn't actually exist in the first place. That's something that, I learned a little bit about economics, and this idea that we are all sort of tending to go towards equilibria as a natural part of, human evolution, or as a natural part of economics, is complete nonsense. And this idea that the problems occur when we actually interfere with the natural equilibria, and that's the reason why we have the problems. No, that's just not the case. In fact, if anything, the opposite is true in my view. Which is that the problem is that we are not tweaking and intervening where we should be and regulating where necessary. I'm not talking about an overarching regulation. We're not talking communism here, folks. I'm just talking about undertaking measures to make sure that these stresses in the global economy are much less than they actually are. And I think that some of the problems we've seen, many of the problems we've seen over the past 5 years with the global recession and so on, is to do with the fact that we've had not enough regulation.
The problem with regulation could be used to do more harm than good. If you have regulation which is good for big corporations and they are the only ones who can manage it, and then it kills small businesses, then you're not, regulation could be abused.
This is a different subject, but small businesses are good. Everyone knows that small businesses are good, and that no idiot wants to hurt small businesses.
Except the big corporations. Except the big corporations.
Huh? Sorry?
Except the big corporations.
No, I'm talking about people in government. No, I'm not talking about people in government who might be bribed by the corporations. I'm talking about economists. I'm talking about ordinary people that would rather buy from the guy around the corner rather than go to the supermarket if the prices were the same. Someone they know or someone they know.
But look at what happened in the United States. They brought in regulation which helped a lot of corporations become monopolies. Instead of doing some kind of a regulation which balance the forces between big corporations and small businesses.
You see, the problem with America is what they like to call, it's not called that in the UK, but what they like to call corporatism. The government in the US has been bought up by corporations. So the problem is that when they regulate, they may well be regulating on behalf of the corporations instead of on behalf of the people.
So let me ask you this: which candidate do you support?
Who do you think?
Bernie Sanders.
Of course I support Bernie Sanders. Are you kidding me?
Okay, the guy who has all the good intentions that will take us to hell eventually.
But, well, no, he won't take us to hell, because I don't think he's going anywhere. And I know this is kind of sacrilege, but I'm just keeping it real. You know, a lot of Bernie supporters will want to, you know, ride that train and say he's going to eventually get there in the end. I'm afraid he isn't. And not only that, I'm actually quite fearful that Trump is going to be the next president of the United States.
So let me ask you this couple of questions. What do you think would happen if Bernie was the president? And what do you think would happen if Trump would be the president?
Well, I think Bernie would face a lot of opposition, but I think he would actually genuinely push through some of the policies that he's advocating, which I think a lot of people sympathize with. But if Trump gets in, I think he won't be quite as bad as he has presented himself to be, because, you know, during this Republican circuit nomination, they tend to shift to the right and they say all kinds of intolerant things. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think what Trump said about Mexicans was, you know, disgusting. And that kind of conduct would be, it would not be tolerated in European countries. A candidate who spoke about minorities or neighbors in that way would be expected to give his resignation the next day. Only in America can someone get away with saying something like that in public. A very senior politician, perhaps the next president of the United States. But what I mean to say is that I think he will rein it in. I don't think he will be such an extreme president as we are expecting him to be.
I don't expect him to be an extreme president at all.
Yeah, but I still don't think that he will be at all successful.
So here's another hypothetical question, which is an interesting, you know, thought experiment. What would you prefer? A president that says all the right things according to your ideology and would promote all the ideas that you like him to promote, however, would be a huge failure in promoting them and maybe even, you know, not suited for the job, and maybe even, you know, kind of kill the economy, not kill, but, you know, harm the economy, or to have an obnoxious, disgusting, racist, what have you, bigoted president that would actually make the economy better for everyone. However, he will, on occasion, would say something or do something that would, you know, kind of be painful for one group or another.
You're not giving me a good choice here.
No, I know I'm putting it this way because I want to. I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen. This is the thing that brings me to prefer Trump over Sanders, because I think I believe very strong, and maybe not very strongly, but I believe from my experience, from what I saw from politicians here in Israel, from prime ministers, is that the people like Trump are more likely to get stuff done, get things done. I think he would be able to make the economy in the United States better compared to Sanders. And this is very important because people are forgetting, maybe he's, you know, is this and that, is not that is stupid, is not that good with blah, blah, blah. But if I'm comparing him to Sanders, I think he'll do a better job. Now, he might be obnoxious, he might be, you know, say racist things and, you know, hateful things. But on the, you know, on the end game, I see him performing better than Sanders on the whole.
So if you're talking about the types of policies that he will enact, I don't really agree. But if you're talking about whether he will be able to bribe and to you know, shake the greasy hands of people who would normally oppose him, through greasing their palms or whatever, then yeah, I think that Trump would be able to do that much better than Sanders would. That he could get other people to cooperate because he has many means of being able to basically bribe them into supporting him. And you know, this is a serious problem of the U.S. government, that there is so much obstructionism that whoever gets into power, they always have to face the opposition.
Exactly. And this is a pragmatical way of thinking.
Trump would be more effective in getting the opposition to agree to his policies, but I don't think that his policies will be good.
Okay.
And,
so
as I was saying previously, Trump would be a continuation of the neoliberal policies that have caused such tremors in the global economy. So I don't believe that that actually would help the situation at all. He would be a continuation candidate. And if we are not doing it right at the moment, if things are not continuing in the correct way, then I don't think a continuation candidate would be a sensible thing to have.
Okay, fair enough. It's a fair point, which I don't know if I'm agreeing completely, but
I think it's a similar story for Hillary. You know, that she is a kind of a continuation candidate.
She's the corporate sellout, like Sargon always saying.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to agree with him, but
because it's Sargon.
but you know,
let me say this. Let me say this. I think that Trump might do some mistakes, but I think that if Sanders is too weak to do anything, he'll be like a puppet or like a scarecrow in the Oval Office. Then you got a vacuum of power. And who will fill this vacuum of power? It probably would be the lobbyists. And, you know, they'll just take over and do whatever the fuck they want. So I'm not sure that would be a better... Let's say, for example, that lobbyists in the United States want to pass a law which would be very detrimental to the American people, but it would be very profitable for Goldman Sachs and such. And now Trump, who doesn't owe anyone shit, and he thinks, well, I'm a billionaire. I don't give a fuck about anything anymore. I want to help the American people, so I'll battle it to the best of my abilities to prevent that from happening. Now put Sanders there, and he is like, I don't know, not strong enough to prevent it because he is... I see him as a weak leader.
He was elected on a mandate to resist that. That would
I don't think he has the capability.
If he was to go against that, he would be nothing. I'm not even sure if the man could look at himself in the mirror. He would have to make compromises. But if you gave me that kind of example of someone from Goldman Sachs, I honestly don't believe he would go along with it.
Yeah, but maybe it's out of his hands. That's what I'm talking. In the Congress, let's say, now the corporates are able to, you know, bribe or, I don't know, intimidate or lobby many people from both sides of the spectrum, you know, Republicans and Democrats. And maybe if you have a strong leader, an intimidating leader, which can strike deals, different deals, I don't know. I don't know how these things work, but I know that shrewd and very, you know, cunning people are able to weasel their way what they want to happen, you know. I'm looking at my prime minister, which I loathe, by the way, very much. And this guy is one thing you can say, this guy is a great survivor. And, you know, people are trying to take him down left and right, and he just keeps on winning and winning and winning and have everybody, you know, around his finger. And it's amazing to see that, because he's that kind of a person. He's like Trump in a way.
Just to go back a little bit for what you were saying about Trump and this kind of this idea surrounding him that because he's already rich or successful, that he will somehow manage to resist any attempts at lobbying and so on. See, I don't believe that for a moment. This guy has business interests. You think that because he becomes president, he's going to cut completely all of those business interests? I mean, he's going to be wanting to line up his family and friends in the right way. And I mean, in the way that, you know, he does very well, or the businesses associated with him, or his wife and children, as they will be in the future, because I guess he would you know, relinquish control over day-to-day running of his corporations. And I don't think for a moment that his profit motive, the thing that has made him, you know, survive, or the thing that has got him to get up every day in the morning, I don't think for a moment that that self-interest will have gone away because he becomes president.
I agree. I'm just saying he'll use this
is the thing that he is trying to present to people, you know, as if somehow he can resist all of that. I don't believe that for a second.
Well, I'm thinking about he's going to use his great influence in business to, in a way, to promote his own type of plutocracy, which is, you know, using your power to your own economical interests. And
he will have his own favored businessman. He will have his own favored economists. He will have his own favored clique.
And then he can, and then he can make, some alliances with people that would support his own policies.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that the corporations will be running things again.
Look at Israel, for example. We have a lot of corruption here, and Benjamin Netanyahu is known to associate himself with a couple of very well-known billionaires. One of them is Sheldon Adelson from the United States. So if now it makes sense for him to try to push Sheldon into Israel, or, you know, I don't know, make policies according to his own interests, and it goes against the interests of a different corporation, then he'll just, you know, take down that corporation. So, and if he wants what's best for Israel, second place, he can, you know, always try to find ways to use that to push his own agendas. If you're Sanders and you have no leverage on anyone, you were elected by the people, but you have no leverage on anyone, then you're a powerless president. You're just a scarecrow, just a puppet.
But doesn't the fact that you actually have office give you power and leverage?
I don't know to what extent the president can overrule the Congress or the Senate.
No, I'm not necessarily saying that he can do that, but I'm sure that it does mean that he has leverage over policymakers and leverage over, you know, corporations that will be trying to queue up to actually get some kind of favorable deals or favorable legislation.
But you're saying that he is like an ideologue that would not, you know.
Yeah. I am saying that, but what I'm also saying is that that doesn't stop them from coming to him, and that he can work with them, you know.
But then you got Trump again, isn't it? That, you know, isn't it the same thing?
Well, you know, no, it's not the same thing, because when it comes down to policies, Trump doesn't have any policies, for God's sake. Do you know what his policies are?
Yeah, I think he's kind of want to preserve the same economical system in the United States. He wants less social benefits.
You know, voting for a guy and we don't even know what his policies are apart from building a frigging wall.
Which tells you that he's not going to change anything, and he wants to take down, you know, more social benefits. He's not going the social way. He's not going to increase social fundings of, you know, poor people, or you know, free education, more free, less taxes, more free, maybe less taxes. He wants less taxes, but he wants a smaller government.
Yeah, except once he's in government, he won't be wanting a small government.
I don't know. I don't think that going the socialist way of doing things by providing people everything from the government is a good thing.
Well, you know, that's a different question. But what I'm saying is that Trump, once he gets into power, I think he'll be much less keen on shrinking the government, just as Ronald Reagan, who was seen as such a, you know, an economic right winger or a supply sider or whatever, that he actually expanded the government during his tenure.
That might be true. That might be true. But again, think of what kind of policies he's going to implement. I don't think he's going to offer a lot of social benefits, increase social benefits. And I think Bernie Sanders will try to increase social benefits. Obamacare is saying, and this is a very thing that I don't know what to think, because when you're saying let's tax more rich people and spread it, equally throughout all people, then you're maybe giving some people more health care, but for most people you are making it worse for them in terms of health care. Same thing you can say, and look at Canada, they have a lot of welfare when it regards single women, encourages women to, I heard, I was on a hangout yesterday and with Diana Davison from Canada, and she said that she had a friend that she lived with. She was 18 and she just got a guy to get her pregnant. She didn't even want him to be the father because she didn't want to work, and at that time the Canadian government gave a lot of money to single women, more than welfare. So instead of having a job, she decided to have a kid.
Right.
This kind of things usually brings down society.
It's not just migrants that are allegedly
exactly. This is something that Dennis Prager has mentioned. He said that it is corrosive to humanity or to people, to your soul, when you're getting something for nothing. And it's very corrosive. I very much would like to hear your opinions after you watch that video. If you're going to watch that video. Okay,
well, if you send me a link, that would be useful, and then I will watch it.
Okay, and I think I need to end this here because I planned it for 1 hour. We got carried away.
Yeah, I don't like to, I know you like to talk and talk and talk.
Yeah, I do.
I don't like to go on for long because people get bored and stuff. I know I don't have time to watch Hangouts for hours on end. So
amazingly, many people enjoy it. I don't know how they do that. I don't have the time, but
that's great, and I've seen your figures, and it's kind of impressive that your subs are really happy to sit and listen to your videos. I mean, even if they're quite long ones, I think that's.
I get people telling me that they're just doing something at home, putting it in the background, just cooking or cleaning, and
like turn it up loud and do the hoovering.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So thank you, Eric, for this conversation. It was fun.
Thanks for having me on, and it's been it has been fun, and I mean that actually, it has been.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Eric. Good night, and see you soon.
See ya.
Bye-bye.